Yeah. Good afternoon, good morning. I'm sure we're joining from different parts of the world. Welcome to this webinar titled Product Leadership in Action, Lessons from Industry Experts. So we have three experts in product management here with us today. So we want to know what is required to be a successful leader, what it is to be responsible for charting the course of an organization in the area of products, what it is to be praised when your products are doing well, and also what it feels like when products you thought would do well bombed. So I'm sure you must have had your fair share of product successes and failures. So welcome everybody. This webinar is brought to you by 10th Code Media. My name is Francis Ebuehi, and I'm the principal consultant and CEO of 10th Code Media. Now, what is 10th Code Media? 10th Code Media is a business technology management company. We collaborate with forward-thinking brands to achieve their business objectives through strategy, creativity, and technology. We build differentiated innovation capabilities that provide self-sufficiency in driving strategic innovation over the long term. All in all, what I've just said is that we help you move forward. Okay. Today we'll be talking to three experts. The first is Tim Harper. Tim, welcome. He's the Vice President of Products at Datamaran. With 18 years of experience building products for very diverse markets, Tim brings grounded experience from the trenches of product management, rounded up with an executive MBA. His interest in combining the human connection of user experience and the geekery of big data to deliver products of real value are what got him started. But the impact that climate tech can have in the fight for the future of our planet is what gets him out of bed in the morning. So Tim, welcome. Welcome to this webinar.
Thank you, Francis, and thanks for having me.
Okay. Now, next is Mitch Christow. Mitch is the Group Product Manager, Google Workspace at Google. Mitch leads the compliance and digital sovereignty practice within Google Workspace and Gemini for Workspace, which is generative AI in Workspace. As a 10-year veteran product manager at Google, Mitch has extensive experience with regulatory compliance in multiple industries and across multiple regions. Mitch is also responsible for all efforts around e-discovery and information governance within Google Workspace. Mitch has been leading efforts in financial services compliance within Google Payments before joining the Workspace team. Prior to joining Google, Mitch has worked in highly regulated industries like healthcare, financial services, and aviation, where he worked on compliance aspects like FINRA, HIPAA, and PCI compliance. Mitch is a graduate from the University of Rochester, where he holds 2 bachelor's degrees, and Boston College, where he received his master's in business administration. Mitch, you're welcome to this webinar.
Hi, Francis. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. And the last, but not the least, is David Oluwaseun Omotosho. He is a seasoned director of product management with over 19 years of experience driving innovation and growth across telecoms, banking, and payments. In his current role at Mastercard, he leads product strategy and the development of digital payment solutions for emerging markets, focusing on delivering scalable, customer-centric products for channel partners. David is skilled at navigating complex environments and aligning cross-functional teams to deliver impactful results. Prior to joining Mastercard, he served as the head of digital business and ventures at Union Bank Nigeria, and also head of mobile financial services at Nine Mobile, formerly known as Etisalat Nigeria. You're welcome, David. He's the Group Director, MNO Product Management at Mastercard. Welcome again, David.
Thanks, Francis. Thanks for having me.
Great. And I am, as I said, the principal consultant CEO of 10 Code Media, a business technology management company. I'm an innovation and fintech professional who has traversed the worlds of consulting, financial services, e-business, technology, and telecoms in the last 30 years. I'm also a consultant advisor to the IFC, World Bank, on digital transformation, digital financial services, e-commerce, fintech, and marketplace initiatives. I'm a certified project manager and a certified Scrum product owner. So now we've gotten all the introductions out of the way. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Okay. I think I'll start with you, Tim. Tim, you've been in this industry for quite some time. Okay. Tell us, how has the journey been? How did you get to this point? Did you start as a product officer thinking that one day I'm going to be a product leader, coordinating the vision, development, and management of notable products that people all around the world use now? So, what has your journey been like?
Thanks. I think as most people did about 18 years ago, I fell into product management. I didn't actively choose it. I was a project manager for a small agency building websites and applications. And because it was a small agency, I really owned those products. I was responsible for the full life cycle of those products and the success of those products. And from there, this brilliant recruiter named Wanda sent me for a product management role. And I still remember the interviewer asking me if I knew the difference between the two. And back then I said no, but I still got the job. And that product is the one that we worked on, Francis, together for the first time.
Yes.
The rest is history, as they say after that. I think the journey to product leadership has been an interesting one because as a product manager, you're central to the product, and you're looked up at from the development teams and from stakeholders to lead the product, and that's a leadership role in its own right, and the progression across from a smaller company to a larger company, you naturally absorb direct reports under you as well, and are forced into leadership. So again, falling into that leadership role, or maybe it just came naturally to me. But keen to hear what the others have to say about their journeys as well.
Okay, great team. Yeah, I worked with Tim at Naspers a while back. Over to you, David. I worked with David in Airtel. So what's been your own journey?
Well, I think the defining moment for me was over at the Lagos Business School. Prior to that, I was working in Airtel, as you know, and there the work I was doing was mainly billing along telco lines, and it was really interesting. I loved it, and it was more on the technology side, if I can say so. And having finished my business school, or halfway into the business school, I saw what life is like on the business side in terms of defining and owning what the product life cycle is, and basically influencing what gets done on tech. This is when I dove in. So unlike you, Tim, I dove into product with that thinking that I wanted to be on the side of the business where things make sense, and that's how I started. I found a product that I loved as well, which I think that also pulled me in, because I started from working on traditional telco products almost very quickly into working on financial services products that were solving impactful problems in a country like Nigeria, where it was underpenetrated. So I found that impact, I fell in love with it, and basically started working on those products. And of course, as I grew along the lines, I had my own team and had to define what the product is like. Almost as you say, I became the CEO of the product, and that progression just naturally came. But I would also say that there's a lot of learning along the way, along with that responsibility, to define what the product looks like. And as you learn, just so that you can put it back and plow it back into your product. You just sort of naturally progress along the lines of leadership based on what you've learned and acquired along the way. And that's how I will define my progression into product leadership.
Okay, great. Over to you, Mitch.
Yeah, absolutely. My journey really started on the software engineering side. I was working at a number of companies over the years, working on implementations for websites, for various software projects. And what I noticed more and more as I was working with the quote unquote business side of the equation, who was making decisions on how the product should function, what features should be in there, I often found myself really disagreeing with the leadership on the business side, because often they were driving decisions based on, let's say, anecdotal evidence, maybe just an individual preference to one customer over another, and they weren't looking at the data. And so very often on the engineering side, we were really scratching our heads. Why did they decide to build a feature this way? Or why did they decide to have this feature at all versus another capability? And that really drove my passion to say, I want to be more involved in the decision making. I want to be on that side to drive really what should be created for the customer, for the user, based on the data that we had, based on the information that we saw. And that at the time really drove me towards finding a way to get more involved on the business side. Product management as a role was very loosely defined. I think to a certain extent it still is today. But it was essentially the closest thing I could find to staying kind of with one foot in each world. I wanted to make sure I still have a lot of exposure on the technology side, really drive innovation, while at the same time really meeting user needs and building what folks really want. And that kind of really defined my journey into the world of product.
Great. Mitch, you touched on something, and that's the requirements from the business side and the technology side. How do these things play out as a leader, that you have to juggle priorities from both sides? Which one takes preference? You have the technology people, you have the business people, and you also have the customer who wants certain things. Okay, how have you been able to juggle all this? I mean, since you brought it up, let me start with you. How have you been able to juggle all this?
Yeah, it is. I think it is an art form. I will tell you, one of my mentors early on in my career has given me really good advice about this. And what he always told me, he said, Mitch, as a product manager, you're not in the product business, you're in the relationship business. It is your job to make sure that you build all the relationships with all of the constituents, all of the players, in order to make sure that you can really drive the product forward. Because everybody who's somehow involved has an opinion on what needs to be done, right? Finance says they want to make sure the product generates as much revenue as possible. Legal is interested in making sure the product has as little legal exposure as possible. So every constituent has some sort of goal. The only person who has a goal in mind that this product needs to work for the user is the product manager, right? And so while you listen to all of the inputs from engineering, right, in terms of they want to make sure this works well within the architecture that's already been built, with legal, with sales, with finance, with tax, accounting, all of the different players that have something to do with the product, ultimately the only person that represents the user is you as the product manager. And so you always have to keep that in mind. And I like this analogy in meetings of the empty chair, right? The person that's not there, the person that's not able to voice an opinion, is the actual user when decisions are made. And so it is, in my opinion, your job as a product manager to represent that. And that means often, weighing various, sometimes diametrically opposed opinions against each other, and either coming up with a compromise or coming up with a decision, and then moving forward. Right? This can often mean, for example, I'll give you a recent example from a few years ago, where there were folks that had different opinions on what should be done. And I said, if your opinion is different, write up a memo, write a risk memo as to why you think this is not a good decision or not a good idea to move forward in a certain direction. We'll include that in the overall document set, and leadership can see exactly what the pros and cons are in case that they want to either choose a different direction or understand why a certain direction may make more sense. But ultimately, and I think, David, you were saying that earlier, you are, quote unquote, the CEO of the product, right? It is your decision what should happen with the product. And so from that perspective, while you have to have really good relationships, you have to make the final decision on how the product should operate.
So Tim, what's your take on it? Different, or you want to add to that?
I think that works in some of the smaller decisions, but there are some of the bigger decisions that that as much as you're the CEO of the product, you aren't always the smartest person in the room, and you have to defer to somebody. So for some of the big architectural decisions, etc., you have to defer. I also see the product or the product leader, product manager role as product diplomat. So making sure that the conversations that should be happening between all of those stakeholders are actually happening, and guiding them to an actual outcome, so an actual decision to be made. Because I see so many times where product managers are so set on very specific outcomes, whether they're representing their own bias or the voice of the customer. And yeah, to your point, Mitch, it's that art form of combining all of those opinions and bringing them together to a mutually beneficial decision or path forward. So yeah, that's my slightly different take on it.
Okay, Dave, you want to chip in, or you agree with everybody?
Yeah, as they said it, I kept seeing the different words from the relationship manager, so true, the diplomat, so true. One more that I'm going to add to that is the mediator, right? And I'm sure you can all relate with this. Look, the way I have seen it in the work that I've done is it takes a lot of alignment. There's so many parts that you have to align, and that's how it just has to be done, because as you have said, there's these various stakeholders that have and then sometimes you to add to all of that, you've got the hippo in the room, and the situation could get really complex. And it starts to, I've been in situations where these kind of conversations really led to timelines not being met, increased budgets around products and what you're trying to do. I've used some tools. I also think tools come to play here in terms of, phasing things out, working with prototypes, trying to get data. One thing I like is what Mitch said is really around bringing the customer into the room. But another way to bring the customer into the room is to start early with the customer or the users. And that's where prototypes really help, and surveys and just the different ways that you could bring the customer into the room and bring that very, very close to the stakeholders, so that, everyone then sees that care you're talking about starts to get filled progressively. And I think that's another, option that I've seen work.
Okay, great. By the way, for all those watching, if you have questions, just drop them in the chat box while I continue with the questions now. Okay, now you guys are leaders now, obviously. So how have you been able to manage your roles and responsibilities within the C-suite? Because you find that even though you're an advocate of the customer, when drawing up your vision, it must align with the vision of the organization. And if there's a dissonance, how do you manage that? Because as you said, there are different stakeholders. You have the board, you have the management, you have customers, you have even the team. So, and even have regulatory bodies. So how do you manage all this while sitting there and trying to manage everybody that have a stake in your business? Because it's as if you are just the midwife of all these things, and it seems that they are all telling you what to do. You now have to choose what you want to do. How do you manage all that at the C-suite level? Tim?
So I think whenever you're talking to the C-suite or the board, you've got to talk their language, and it's an investment case that you're presenting. And if you have the data and and not necessarily hard data, so also customer interviews and customer feedback is also data to bring to that conversation. I think that's always the best way to start the conversation. But I guess it's always diving deeper than just that surface level business case as well. So really understanding some of the problems and some of the technicalities that lead into it, both from an operational perspective, if there's an operational element, but then also from an engineering perspective as well. So overarching the investment case, but then bringing in those other perspectives at a level that's understandable to that persona, to that stakeholder.
Great. Mitch, your take?
Yeah, I'll echo some of what Tim was saying. The knowing your audience and knowing what language to use at what level, right, is very, very important. And what I also found, and again, this comes back to some mentorship early in my career, when you talk to the board, to C-suites, really, actually to anybody, but really specifically in those situations, data wins, right? If you have data, it's much easier to tell the story. If you have opinion, usually, like David was saying, the hippo usually wins, right? Highest paid opinion in the room usually gets their way. And so if you come armed with data and you're able to tell a good story about, marrying data along with the story on why something matters to the users, to the customer base, and why it's good, let's say, for the business to do, the decision process actually becomes pretty easy. So it's the preparation that really matters a lot. And I would also say the second thing that I found very important, you have to have meetings often ahead of time, one-on-one with various constituents. When you meet in a larger setting like a board or with a C-suite with multiple people in the room, that conversation should be really anticlimactic. Essentially, you've already decided and made all of your cases ahead of time with people, and all you really have then in the room is a lot of nodding heads. And that just becomes a lot simpler. If you present brand new things in a meeting and some people see it for the first time, that just invites debate.
Yeah. I remember way back. I presented. That was in my early days. I presented the case for deploying ATMs, and I told them that it was going to take about 6-7 years for return on investment. I was quickly checked out of the room. I mean, it didn't fly. But guess what? About a month later, a competitor rolled out ATMs, and at the next call I got in the morning was, Francis, how come you allowed them launch before us? And that's something you face frequently as a leader. Now, I want to move on quickly. David, I know you've had your fair share of successes and failures, and could you give us, I mean, I'm sure you may have some confidential information, but could you just at least take us through some of the things that you have learned that you will not do concerning some of these failures you may have faced in your journey?
Yes, I'll do that for the benefit of those watching. I'll do it, but I really have to comment on what Mitch said, guys. Whoever is watching here, that is something that you're not going to get from any MBA school or anyone. It's really those coffee conversations that make whatever it is you're going to have in the meeting. So it's quite important. Regarding product learnings, well, like I said, I'm basically a product of learn failures. Without saying a lot about these two products I'm going to talk about. Early in my career, we faced this situation. It's about bringing. I think one of the greatest learning was trying to bring a new product into a new market. I think that's one of the most difficult ones. New product into a new market. So you're doing something totally new, and you're launching it in a new market as well. So you have very little data. You're definitely going to go through some learnings there. And my learning there was really, it went through a huge learning curve. This kind of project would really require a lot of education because you're bringing it into the market, and beyond the benefits of the product, beyond people even loving the product, there's a huge change management involved. Probably not best to be first to market when doing this, but probably position yourself near whoever comes first and use that wave to learn. But that's one of the huge learnings that I've had, and something closely related to that is something that I've learned really recently as well. Based on the kind of dimension you use to launch products into the market. It's called the jobs to be done concept. Really understanding what the job that the user is going to use the product for, and building along those lines was really another important aspect that I learned on a product that I've launched in the past. And I still continue to learn, really, both internally and externally. Build buy decisions in terms of or partnership decisions. In terms these days, there's a lot said about traditional companies, either banks, telcos, payment companies partnering with fintechs. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made there. I mean, without naming any name, companies really position themselves in ways that are different to what you see on paper. So a lot of due diligence should go into those type of partnerships before making decisions. Are a few of the learnings that I can just put into this. It'll fill a bag, and I can continue.
Yeah. Mitch, we constantly hear about Google launching new things, sunsetting new old ones, and it's like every day something is dying, something is coming up. I'm even still learning how to use Google Workspace. So I think for you, it must be a roller coaster ride in your job. So what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, yes, we have certainly sunset many applications over the years. I will say that very often when the decision is made that a particular product is no longer meeting the needs of the customers or the marketplace, it does make sense to quote unquote pull the plug earlier than later. I think the longer you maintain applications, the more you create disadvantages for your customers and for yourself, right? You have to maintain infrastructure and maintain setups that no longer they're no longer relevant in the marketplace necessarily. You often have a better solution. There may be, in the case of Google as an example, we often have similar products that are grown in different parts of the business and in different parts of the organization, and it makes sense sometimes to combine them, right, and provide a singular product that meets the needs of multiple constituents rather than several different products with more niche applications within that. And while it is a painful decision to sunset a product, and it can be disruptive, I think it is important to make that decision really earlier on, because in the long run, it is more beneficial for the customer to do that rather than dragging it out essentially.
Tim, any take on that?
Yeah, I think building products is a creative process, and with any creative process, it's never everlasting. So if you are a young product manager watching this and you've never had a failure, It is going to happen. Prepare for it. Get yourself ready, and see that as a growth element within your career and within your ability to build products. Because I think as creatives, you have to tear down to rebuild to build something better at the end of the day. So yeah, I think it's definitely part of the overall process, and just be comfortable with it as soon as you can. Is my advice there.
Okay, great. Now I'll throw this to any one of you. Over the years, we've transitioned from the waterfall approach, and now we're now talking agile. And I was doing a training for a particular client, and we had a situation where they had two factions. One team was using the agile methodology, while another was still using the waterfall, and they really could not sync. They were at crossroads. What would they do? I said, okay, fine. Let's look at how we can actually get people to work together to see whether you even need agile alone or a hybrid. But at least everybody's supposed to be involved in taking that decision. I dare say they are still trying to take that decision. That's a couple of months after. But for some of us that have gone through that process, how have you seen it? How have you been able to convince your management that there really is a need to actually change the approach to developing new products? Anyone, please.
I'll just jump in here because I've very much gone through a, I think, circle on this evolution. I will tell you, early on when Agile and the various methodologies came out in the early 2000s, I was very enamored with them. I thought, it's a great brand new way of building product. It showed a lot of advantages. But I think the single biggest thing, in my opinion, is you really have to decide based on a number of factors that have nothing to do with these frameworks on what will work best, right? There's cultural and organizational considerations that you have to take. Honestly, the product matters a lot in this particular case, because some of these, whether it's waterfall or agile or Kanban or any of these, they have certain sweet spots, right? They work in certain environments fairly well, but they really utterly fail in other circumstances. So blindly applying it just because it may have worked in other environments, or you've heard lots of great things about one of these frameworks, is not really is actually a recipe for disaster. The adage that I always liked is, for example, you don't use Agile to build a nuclear power plant, right? There are places where architecture, waterfall, proper design really make sense and matter, right? And there's places where Agile is very, very useful. So things like the scope, the size of the project, how well the space is defined, right? How well are these the requirements known? If it's like a brand new greenfield, it's a small type of project. Small, nimble approaches like an Agile make a lot of sense. So from my perspective, I often look at how much overhead am I adding to a project by choosing one framework or another, right? The quote unquote overhead of that managerial aspect needs to match the scope of the project. And I think that really then drives, in my opinion, a lot of the decisions on which way to go. And you shouldn't be married to one of these and just blindly apply it. I think you really need to look at the circumstances.
Okay. David, what has your experience been?
When he said that about the nuclear bomb, the nuclear reactor, and that really put it in the right perspective. I will just add a bit to that to sort of allow it to sink in as well. It depends on what type of strategy or what type of business that you find yourself. I have over the years been in either one or two places, either in the core business or in the emergent strategy business or some kind of emergent business where we are trying to test or try something new really quickly. And I have found, just to the point that you made, Francis, they can coexist in a business, and this is probably what a form of hybrid, where within that emergent technology or that emergent business that's trying to do something really quick in a green field, there is an agile methodology being adopted. And then within the core business itself, the core business continues to use waterfall because really that's where they want to keep the lights on. That's where the nuclear reactor really is. And as such, it depends on what you're trying to do. But overall, in the messaging for this, and even all of the other things, Mitch sort of woke me up to something that's really important, is about really focusing on and falling in love with the problem, as opposed to the solution. And that's one thing that as a product manager, you sort of learn along the way. And that also helps you to sort of make decisions that are not based on, an overexposure to liking one solution over the other, because the context really matters.
Tim, anything to add?
Yeah, I completely agree with the guys. I think trying to mix the two is like mixing oil and water. Eventually, they're going to drift apart and go their own way in any case. So best is to figure out, again, like which applies the best to your situation.
Okay, great. Just now we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence. That's the new buzzword everywhere now. How has this affected the role of product leaders and even product management? Has it made it easier? Has it made it harder? How has it been? Mitch, I know how you doing with Gemini.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you, I find the technology and the capabilities that it creates really fascinating. And sometimes I think it's a little bit funny when a lot of these technologies rolled out, the general population has taken to them fairly quickly, and people often they use the generative AI and they may not necessarily think a whole lot about it. What just amazes me is the amount of technology and the sophistication that has to exist for something like this to work is mind-boggling, right? It's the amount of data that has to be ingested, the processing that has to take place, and so to a certain extent, I'm really in awe of the technological aspect of this, right? From a product perspective, there are a lot of things that this technology will be very useful for, and quite honestly, we don't really know yet all of the places where this will actually benefit. In my experience so far, not just internally but also with customers, a lot of them see amazing potential with it. What they're still trying to figure out is how do they best leverage that in their organization. And I liken this often to, there's a new shiny hammer, so now people are starting to look for nails, right? And trying to find that business case where it will really help. And for every organization, it's slightly different, right? For some places, really easy case for customer service. I've seen other places where generative AI can really help with things like contract management, analytics, right? Analyzing vast amounts of data. The fact that you can essentially scale yourself at an amazing pace in terms of being able to consume and process vast amounts of information in order to gain some interesting insights has really amazing potential. You need to also make sure, though, that you keep a very critical eye on everything, right? We all know hallucinations are a real thing, and you need to make sure that you continue, using your brain and think about the results when you operate with something like this. But what I will say is we're very early on, right? These technologies have only been around like basically less than 2 years to the public. Imagine what this is going to look like 2 years from now. So I think the time is now to get familiar with them, to understand them. And that will allow you to then also decide under what circumstances does this actually become a useful tool. Because one word of not necessarily caution, but something I've seen a lot in the AI space. I've done a lot of AI in Google over the years. Not every problem requires AI as a solution, right? Because AI often is a very expensive proposition from an implementation perspective, from a resourcing and operational side. Sometimes a single simple if statement is actually just as effective as building out an entire knowledge base for the deep learning or machine learning for driving decisions. So I think it's important as a product leader to think about, does this particular tool help in my situation? Are there other ways to accomplish the same thing?
Okay. Tim, you are in climate tech. What has AI got to do with climate technology and product management?
Yeah, I guess climate tech is all about data. So, processing large amounts of data, and AI really comes into its strengths in that industry because of that huge amount of data. I did want to comment on sort of the practical application of AI within the product as a product manager.
Mm-hmm.
I think AI is a tool, and there's a sort of life cycle in that development process. So practically speaking, if you're thinking about incorporating AI into your product, there's a whole prompt lifecycle management that needs to happen for the prompts that drive the AI and the models themselves as well. So there's model life cycles as well. And getting familiar with those processes and management tools that will support that incorporation into the product is really key. So that's there's even job titles like prompt engineers that are close to building those great AI products like ours at Datamaran. So yeah, from a practical perspective, really understand what it takes to incorporate AI into your product.
Great. David, what's your take on AI and product management or product development?
Yeah, there's two sides to it that we've already started to see. On the productivity side, I think it's great in terms of how it takes a highly productive team or a team that's really trying to get things done to new levels of achieving what they need to do in terms of processing data, in terms of understanding what they need done. That productivity aspect is just something that's going to change the game and has already started to change the game. The other aspect that is in terms of what are the use cases and how do these use cases then become features or parts of products that you're building, I think that aspect is still to be understood. Clearly, Mitch is in it and knows a lot about what's going on there. I think it's still yet to be understood. It holds a lot of promise, but I'll liken it to cloud. And one of the things that we saw really early is, consultants and people saying, hey, use cloud. And then at the end of the day, you see the cost that came as a result, and you're like, was that the right solution, to deploy that feature? So it has a high productivity, integer along with it, but you shouldn't use it blindly because you just don't apply AI to all solutions, because then down the line, it's really going to be a decision. But on the productivity side, I'll say, hey, go in teams that are using AI for their productivity. It will start becoming a differentiator is basically it. So teams really need to start adopting from a productivity angle, but keep a close eye on how they use it for product features.
Great. So I think one of the last questions before our time is almost up. It's about people now. How do you manage people in these teams? Now, you've had situations where product managers I'll tell you, the product managers of before are totally different from product managers of today. So how do you manage people? How do you manage the way they do things? How do you get them to do stuff? And how do you get them to align with the vision that you've put in place to actually push through with your message? How do you do that? What will make a good product leader an effective leader? Mitch.
If you don't mind, I want to quickly go on that, or Mitch could go if he's got something at the tip of his tongue.
No, David, I love your passion, so please check.
Thanks. It just came to me, the word balance, right? And that's what I've used. I think that's what's required now with product teams, and product teams have started to morph, right? Where you have almost a stack, right, of maybe analysts, developers, designers, and you have them in close proximity to each other. And as such, whoever's leading these teams has to have a balanced approach across the board. I think the other word and the other thing that's really important to give is some level of autonomy across the teams and the right challenge. So, and I guess putting all of that together is really where the balance comes in, because if you're not challenging people with the right product, with the right project, I mean, that doesn't get them really motivated. And then you not having that balanced approach where you're able to communicate properly, challenge them with the right thing, allow them to also have some level of autonomy in a way that is almost back to where we talked about how you're trying to balance different things. Is just a way. It's kind of scary, going with this approach, because you have to be able to shift at different gears. But I think that's what's required in the product manager of today.
Great, David. Great. Mitch?
Yeah, I think from my experience, the first thing that I always find is you have to be able to communicate your vision. You have to make sure that folks on your team take the particular challenge, the particular problem space, the particular place where you want to end up, for example, at the end. You want them to internalize that. That should become their mission, right? You need them to buy in. You need them to really become passionate about this. Once you've been able to articulate your vision, to really motivate people on the direction, I think David is very right in many respects, that you want to get out of their way, right? You want to give them the runway to be able to then solve the problems, build the product, create the implementation, and really avoid being too descriptive. I often, again, I love using analogies. It's like, I'll point you to where the top of the mountain is. I don't care which route you take, right? As long as you get to that top of the mountain. And I will often try to bite my tongue, not saying go left or go right, simply because that is giving that person autonomy, allow them to grow, maybe allow them to fail to a certain extent, right? You want people to be able to grow, and that growth often comes through personal experience, not through prescriptive management. And so it's communicating the vision, giving them that passion, and then being there when they need your help, but otherwise give them the autonomy that they want and need in order to really succeed.
Great, Mitch. Tim?
Yeah, I completely agree. And that empowerment means that they become successful in their own right. And if they are successful, then that's a reflection on your support and your guidance to them being successful. So completely agree with that. I think the other point that I wanted to add is that, as a product leader, you need to have a good level of EQ, so emotional quotient, where you have that self-awareness and you know your own bias, you know your own ego when it gets in the way of decisions, and the ability to separate that out from those decisions on a daily basis, because you have to separate yourself from them. That's really important. So that real understanding of yourself and who you are is really important.
Great. Let me
Francis,
just
one more. Sorry, one more
okay.
thing.
Sorry.
Because again, just like David, I am passionate about working with people. I think it's also really important as a leader that you have to identify how everybody works, right? Everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. And making sure that you interact with each individual on your team in the manner that really speaks to them, right? Some people, like I said, they love the independence. You just kind of show them the problem, say, that's it over there, figure it out. Other people are much more collaborative. They like to come back and ask questions and kind of, ideate with you and try to figure out, is this maybe the right direction, or they want a little bit more guidance and a little more feedback. I think as a leader, it's also important to really adjust your style to the individual person that is under your care. It creates a challenge for you as a leader because it requires more time and more forethought, but it ultimately creates a really, really well running and high performing team.
Then before I ask some of these questions that have been jotted down. Now, where you have people who are very bright, very good, but they can't work with a team, how do you manage people like that?
Yeah. Again, this comes down to the individual, right? What is it that motivates them? What is it what makes them tick, in a lack of a better term, right? And finding that portion, that passion, and seeing if you can hone and direct that in a certain way. And I think part of growth, whether it's you as a leader or people on your team, is also recognizing your own weaknesses, right? And humility. I think humility is a really, really important part for anybody in the business setting, and understanding that I'm not perfect, people I work with are not perfect, and having that understanding. And so I think what I found very often with, let's say, individuals that prefer to walk alone, right, rather than in a team setting, it's a matter of opening their eyes to the other side, i.e., to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, try to understand what they're thinking, and have an open mind. Just start with the idea of their viewpoint, while different, may also have merits, right?
Yeah.
That, I think, is a really important part in kind of building that, building out the relationship.
Okay, great. One of the questions that someone dropped here, what is the role of domain knowledge in product management? Any takers? Tim?
Yeah, I can take that.
Yeah.
I think if you're building a nuclear reactor, you have to have some level of domain
Definitely have to
continue that. But there are products that have very specific patterns, that have very specific knowledge that is easily available. So, for example, like an e-commerce product is something that you can repeat that pattern over and over again. But definitely, more complex technologies like, for example, building Gemini will require a huge amount of domain knowledge. So it is important, but there are certain roles in certain products where you could just dive in as a brand new product manager. And it also comes down to seniority as well. So you could join as a junior product manager or as a mid-level PM and not necessarily have to have all of the domain knowledge at the end of it.
Okay, good. Another one, someone says, a lot of posts on LinkedIn are like, this agile is dead. Is it still necessary? If you're not doing Scrum by the book, you're not doing Scrum, but I don't know what that means, but is agile really necessary, or is it dead? Is it just one buzzword that just come and now it's now fading off? What do you think?
So first of all, obviously, I'm always very cautious of very opinion or very strongly worded titles and on posts, right? I mean, it's obviously there's an agenda there that somebody has.
Yeah.
But my part is I am really staying away from doctrine, right? People arguing this particular framework is better than this other framework, right? I mean, we've seen this with programming languages, we've seen this with databases. Like everybody has their preference, and they will have their arguments about it. To me, as a practitioner, I will have to say simply, it's a tool in my tool chest. Right? Somebody can't tell me a wrench is a bad thing. A wrench is dead. A wrench has a very, very important function in certain circumstances. I don't use a wrench on a nail, but I can certainly move a bolt with it, right? So it really is knowing the right tool for the right situation. And so from that perspective, I would never want to limit myself by removing parts of the tools out of my tool chest.
Great. One last question. Now you feel that people come into product management thinking that there's nothing to product management. Anybody can be a product manager. And you don't need too many certifications. So anybody can be a product manager. I can wake up one day and say, okay, yes, I'm a product manager. If I'm responsible for getting revenue for this particular product, I'm a product manager. Even a product owner says he's a product manager. Now, how do you manage that mindset when you meet people who think that product manager is easy? You can't. I mean, anybody can do product management. Have you met people like that, and how do you deal with that? Anyone?
Yeah,
I think one thing that go ahead, Tim, please.
So I'll take that, but just a very short comment. Anybody can be a product manager, but it's about being a good product manager or not, and that takes time and effort. Whether that's through being in the trenches and gaining experience, or whether that's through very diligent training. Yeah, it's going to take one of those to become a good product manager.
Yeah, David.
So two things. It's the way this type of question has come, or I've seen it is where, and I think it's as a result of the type of product managers that people have worked with, and it maybe comes to that same question of domain knowledge. I think they're linked in a way. I don't know why the person asked this question, but what I found is product managers sometimes are pressured to try and understand or go into other domains that they don't necessarily have to go into. I think that's also one of the aspects that sort of dilute the profession, when the product manager is stepping into various domains at a level that they shouldn't. And then the question then almost becomes asked, what are you doing when you're all over the place and trying to really earn domain knowledge or expertise across the place, as opposed to really being the owner or the one who speaks on behalf of the user, and really create that product portfolio that enables the business to deliver on its goals. So I think really articulating and understanding what that core role of a product manager is and staying within that realm is important to answer that question.
Mitch, anything to say? Or I think it's okay.
Yeah, I've been noodling a little bit on this answer. I mean, to a certain extent, I will just say yes. Anybody can be a product manager, right? But there's certain skill sets that make it easier to be a good product manager, like Tim was saying. I think the nature of product management is really, really varied, which is why probably a lot of people look at this as there's not necessarily much to it, right? Because depending on the day, you will take on lots of different tasks. You have to be very much an all-rounder, right? I think, I don't know if it was Tim or David earlier said kind of like being the CEO of a product. To me, what that often means is CEO doesn't mean you're like, you're the decision maker, you're the overlord of the product. CEO means you take on the task that needs to get done that day. And if there's no resource for it, you just roll up your sleeves and you do it. And that kind of all-round talent and essentially that drive to launch a product, right? That's your overall goal, that passion. Not everybody has that passion, right? And it's not something that is easily acquired. So yes, I think overall, lots of people can be product managers, no doubt about it. I think there's certain skill sets, certain abilities that make it a lot easier to be one compared to other areas.
Okay, great. Last words now. I'll just call your name, and just last words for any aspiring product leaders, product managers aspiring to be great and successful product leaders. Okay, Tim, last words. Any words for?
Yeah, so I started by saying I fell into product management, but I think anybody from a product leadership perspective, everybody has leadership skills within them. So building your confidence to express those, takes very focused, intentional practice. So try one thing, write down what you did, what you're trying, and then reflect on it. And then, there's plenty of self-help books on leadership, but you have to actually start making the decision that this is the person who you are now. And this is the person this is the leader that you want to be or will be in the future. And then the work is to actually, go from A to B and get it done.
Great, Tim. David?
Okay, I thought of 3 words that's really important. And I think my message to everyone would be, let these 3 words really drive you. One is your curiosity. You've got to be a learner, keep learning, and that will just keep enabling you to grow. The second is empathy, really. And it's both internal and external. That is just one key word. Along the way, every step of it, even all the way to leadership, don't lose your curiosity, don't lose your empathy. And this is probably the other way around, because you need this more as a leader. You need courage. And those 3 words are what I would say, let those ones stick with you along the way, and I think you'll be successful. You'll pick up every other thing that you need to do, including the passion.
Okay, great. Mitch?
David, yes, David kind of stole all of my great ideas. I love, David, you were spot on, especially the part about empathy. I think as a product manager, you need an abundance of empathy, because you have to put yourself into the shoes of your user, really internalize their pain and figure out how can you make it better? How can you solve it? Because ultimately product management is really about creative problem solving, right? Figuring out a way to make something better for someone else. And to that point about that empathy, I think my last thought on this is, as a product manager, you have to keep 2 things in mind. The first one is the creative problem solving really focuses on the creative part. I think it was John Ford who once said, if I just built what people were asking me for, they were asking for a faster horse. They never conceived the idea of a car. And as a product manager, that creative part of the problem solving, right? Figuring out a novel way of doing something is really, I think, what makes you successful as a product manager. And what I often tell when I talk to others and they're, for example, describing a particular product area and they want to solve it, I often tell people, please don't tell me how to build the bridge. Describe the valley to me, right? Tell me what your problem is. I will take it to figuring out a solution, because the solution may have not even occurred, to the person that's describing the problem. because I may find ways to resolve it without this ever even becoming an issue for you. A lot of folks often go, I want a remedy. I want to click here, 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 and here, and that solves my problem. I want to say, how about if I solve it and you don't even see the problem in the first place? It never even occurs to you. And so I think that creative, the creative problem solving really is, I think, absolutely key. Everything else will come along. The subject matter expertise, right? The domain knowledge, that's something you pick up with time if you focus on the creativity part. And I think that in my career has really served me the best.
Thank you very, very much. That's a very good way of ending this session. So thanks, David. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Mitch. You've really done justice to this topic, and I hope all those who joined have found value. This recording will be posted on YouTube, so people who have not had the chance to actually listen or watch it will definitely watch it. Thank you very much, guys, and have a nice evening or morning. Wherever.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Really nice meeting everybody.
Good chat.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.